Every beginner sewer faces the pain of how to know what size pattern to choose, and when you sew it all up, it ends up being the wrong size. A whole size too small, a whole size too big. Why is it always the case? So it is something that we all struggle with, and in this video I want to talk with you through how we can better understand all the information that is given to us here, how to use it really well, so we can stop just guessing what pattern size to make and really start being in control of what size you want to make and how you want it to fit on yourself. Welcome, my sewing friends. It is lovely to see your smiling faces again today. Now, this is the third video in a series of 3 about how to choose better sizes, how to take back control, stop guessing what pattern size to make, start measuring, start knowing how to use a pattern only as a tool so you can get better starting sizes. So the first video we talked about garment measurements versus body measurements and what that is, why you need to know it, and how to find the finished garment measurements on your pattern. It's super important. Now, video 2, we talked about ease. Basically, the difference between the body measurements and the garment measurements is ease. What is it? Why we need it on a pattern? How much do we need? How to find it? All of that is in video number 2. And that leaves us to where we are today in how do we use all of this information to better select a pattern that the size, like the starting size that we want it to fit on us. So I'm going to assume that you have seen those other 2 videos first. They are of course linked down below, and I highly recommend that you go and watch those first. Because when you better understand this pattern and how to read it and how to really use the information, that's when you can actually take control, and that's what I want for you. So what's the first? I'm going to take you through sort of 3 different techniques that you can use with all this information that we now know how to get, how to use it to select your size better. So 3 different methods. The first one is a tissue fitting. So you might have heard this term before, maybe you're hearing it for the first time. A tissue fitting is where basically you pin together all of your tissue pattern pieces as if it was sewn together. So, and then fit it on yourself. Now, this isn't necessarily my preferred method myself, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically how you do it is you would pin your shoulder seams together, pin your side seams together. You need to pin in any darts or anything like that, literally pinning in the pattern pieces as if you were stitching those areas, and pin them together, and then you can pop it on yourself to actually get a rough idea of the fit and the size of the garment, because that's what it will be when it's finished. It's probably one of the easiest ways to get started because it doesn't require any measuring and you can just pin it. What you have to do is obviously pin on your stitch line, so where your seam allowance is, you need to mark in. Let's say you have 1.5 centimeter or 5/8 inch, that's where you're pinning, so as if it's finished. So it can be quite easy, but it also can be quite tricky because tissue paper tears really easily, we all know this, and you might only have a half front and a half back, so you end up with only sort of half a body, and it's hard to actually get this to sit right in the center and maneuver it around, and you have to pin it all in and it tears. Did I mention it tears a lot? So it can be quite fiddly and tricky, and often paper is obviously not quite like fabric. So it's often not my preferred choice. I would use a tissue fitting myself to more sort of just gauge where design lines and things are, gauge where the waist is, where like lengths a lot more than actual size. That's one way that you can get started in looking at. So how much ease you need, we'll get to in a minute, because I have another method for sort of figuring out that. It's kind of a combination of all of these that we think is probably the best solution. Now, this is the method that I use. I'm just calling it the tape measure method. So let's take, for example, this pattern. So I know that the finished garment measurements are 40 inches or 102 centimeters. It told me to make a size 14 for my body measurements on the back of the envelope. It tells me that a size 14 is my correct size to make. And so looking at the finished garment measurements, we've got 102 centimeters for a size 14. So rather than a tissue fitting, I like to use the tape measure method. This is really easy. So grab your tape measure, pull it out to the finished garment measurements, and then you can get an idea of where it is going to fit. So obviously these patterns often only give you the bust measurement, not the waist or the hip, or maybe just the waist and not anything else. So this is where being able to go further in this comes into key, but we're using just the information that we've got to get our standard stock size. So we're talking about a starting size, so not individual fit from here. That's sort of next level when you go up the skills level, so to say. We're talking about your starting size. So I've got this tape measure pinned at 102 centimeters, and now what I do is use this to look how big the end garment will be at the bust. Right? So now be careful with this. You tend to sort of do this and you think, wow, that's huge. That must be massive on me. You don't wear your garment like this. So make sure you even it out all the way around. And now look at this dress that I'm even wearing today. It is like that big. So be careful. That is where the ease comes in. And again, we'll get to know how much ease you need in just a minute in my next tip. But let's say, I think, wow, that does seem really big. I think I want this to fit me a bit slimmer. I might go down a size. Well, let's not guess how much a size is. Let's measure it and find out exactly how much a size is and check first before we go ahead and make up a garment. How do we do this? It's pretty easy. We have just been using the finished garment measurements, in which I can look at the size 12 and it tells me it's 96.5. So I can simply then obviously just go to 96.5 and have a look and feel, and wow, that got a lot tighter pretty quick. Remember, you have to move in this. Think about if it's a button up or a zip front, or is it just pull over? Because just pull over, you're going to need more room than what is here, for example. So you need to take lots of things into consideration. We've talked about those in the ease videos. But let's say you don't have those finished garment measurements on your pattern, or you're measuring, you measured the pattern, you don't want to have to remeasure it all again or anything like that. Another way that you can sort of guess how much a size bigger or smaller, either way, works is by looking at the body garment measurement, the body measurements it says on the back here. So for example, the size 14, it says body measurements of 92 centimeters. If I want to have a look down to the size 12, it says 87 centimeters. So that means there's 5 centimeters difference between each of the body measurements, at least for those two sizes, and it's not all uniform all the way through, so do check. So 5 centimeters difference. So then I could use my finished garment measurement maybe that I had, take away 5 centimeters to go down or add to go up, and then I can use that measurement as a pretty safe guess of what the finished garment, like one size smaller in a finished garment measurement. And you can also use this, let's say you've actually just made up a toile or a mock-up and you want to go a size down or a whole size up. This is how you can know how much a whole size will be, or at least your best guess, by looking at those body measurements, getting the size up or down, the amount of difference, and then you'll know how much a size difference is for sure for that particular pattern in those particular sizes, right? No more guessing. So before I show you my final trick to work out how much ease you like, I just need to point out that, you know, patterns are difficult because they're never really intended as a learn to sew guide. That's not what they were designed for. They were designed for home dressmakers who already knew the basics of sewing to be able to use them as a tool. And that's why there's so much assumed knowledge in patterns, and size and fitting is one of them. And it makes it hard as a beginner. And so that's why I created Vintage Sewing School, is that's where we go really deep on topics like this, all of the assumed knowledge of sewing, of patterns, of using them, of how to get much, much better results, just like our grandmothers, mothers of the past were able to create such wonderful garments at home. And I teach you how to, for example, you know, measure the actual pattern pieces so you can figure out the finished garment measurements on any pattern, on any size, bust, waist, hip, the whole lot, and go next level on all of this. So I do invite you to come join me if that sounds what you're after, if you want the real deep into sewing. VintageSewingSchool.com. I've put links down below because I love to have you there and go next level with you in your sewing. But here is the third way that you can sort of combine all of this together. So we've been able to use the finished garment measurements, but how do we know how much ease it is that we like? And this is where you simply would measure a garment that you already have, a similar garment, and find out how much ease is on it. For example, you need to find a similar garment, so a loose-fitting button-up shirt for loose-fitting button-up shirt, a fitted shirt for a fitted shirt, a waisted slim-fit 50s dress for a same sort of bodice, because you want the same method to get in and out, whether it's pullover or not, and the same kinds of fit, because that will then tell you how much ease you want or need, how much you like on a garment. If you've got simple patterns, it's easy because you can lay them flat. And then you can simply measure. The bust is the one that we use the most, and it's the most often given on the pattern instructions here. So you can measure the garment. I simply then like to just fold it over twice, and then I have my full garment. Now, interesting, this says 103. Now, do you remember what the, this one, it says finished garment measurement is 102. So this pattern here in the size 14 is going to end up pretty much exactly the same as this blue blouse at the bust. So I can use this then to put it on. I can see how it fits. I can move in it. Then I can look at this design and figure out if I want it to fit the same, if that's the amount of ease that I like on the garment, or if I do in fact want it a whole size smaller. It just gives you more reference points to better use and understand and start, taking control out of how you want it to fit, because the fit is a personal choice. Remember, this is just a standard size. It's not sort of bust, waist, hip, different alterations for that. This is our starting stock size. Your personal fit adjustments are sort of next level on top of this as you keep going up the sewing skills ladder. And trust me, this gets a lot easier with practice. You'll get used to measuring garments. You'll get used to knowing how much ease you like on different types of patterns and different styles. It just gets easier with practice. So I challenge you to do this on your next garment, in your next pattern, and see, and really decide and see if you get a better resulting garment at the end of it. I would love to hear how you go. I hope this now feels like you have a secret weapon in the sewing department, because I know it feels like that when I learnt it for the first time and learnt this sort of process. It is like a secret weapon. So let me know below how you found this. Do you like it? And if you already use this method, leave us some tips below, your personal tips, because we all learn more by sharing all this information with each other. Do check the description box below for all of those links. And until next time, happy sewing and happy pattern size choosing. Bye.